Thanks for listening to Health and Safety Conversations with Tom Bourne. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week.
Hi, and welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. I'm your host, Tom Bourne, and with me today is the awesome Andrea Paynter. Well, Andrea, how are you?
Good, thanks, Tom. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, and looking forward to having a chat.
Oh, look, we appreciate you being here. It's good to get good quality people on with a solid background of experience and knowledge to come in and share with our listeners. So thank you very much for coming on.
No problem at all.
You've had a long career in safety, but did your professional career start there, or was there something before that?
Tom, my journey into workplace health and safety evolved. It wasn't planned. I'm lucky that I can draw on my previous experience and skills and apply them to workplace health and safety because the practice is so broad. I initially worked in laboratories in the New Zealand dairy industry in microbiology and chemical labs, and I qualified in food technology. It was actually while working in the laboratories that I had my first experience of putting together a quality management system and gaining compliance and certification for the lab. After a number of years, I left laboratory work and I actually joined the police, the New Zealand Police, as a constable. I was working frontline, general duties, and I was stationed in a provincial area where the main industry was farming. A lot of the work was around youth crime and gang-related matters, so it was pretty colourful. I quickly learned how to assess a situation and adapt my communication style to the audience, and also the importance of being genuinely empathetic when dealing with victims of crime. I also developed investigation skills and interview skills during that time, of course, and like many others, I have a lot of policing stories, and there were some very challenging situations. After a number of years, I decided to leave policing and study law, which I did, and following my admission in New Zealand, my admission to the bar, excuse me, I moved to Queensland, where I practiced in personal injury law with a firm based in Noosa. So it's a lovely part of the country to move to. We were acting on behalf of claimants and plaintiffs. Most of the matters that I dealt with were workplace injuries, and there were some motor vehicle accidents, but it was just workplace injuries. The clients who came to the firm had already been through the statutory claim process, and their level of permanent impairment had been medically determined. So these clients wanted to take proceedings at common law proceedings on the basis that their employers were negligently responsible for the injury. So really what I was seeing was failed health and safety. Some of the matters arose from employers not training their staff, so the people hadn't been through inductions, the equipment wasn't appropriate to the work they were doing, they were instructed to cut corners or disregard safety requirements because of worksite or production demands. So it was often 2 or 3 years after the actual injury that I came to meet these claimants or clients. By that time, the injury had had a severe impact on their lives, not only physically but also mentally, because they hadn't been able to work. They had lost touch with co-workers. They weren't able to play in sports teams that they used to be active in. There were family breakdowns, financial challenges. They may have lost the family home, that sort of thing. So really, in safety, we talk about the ripple effect. This was the extent of the ripple effect. These people had been through significant trauma. I found that achieving successful outcomes for these clients was bittersweet because monetary compensation could never replace everything that they had lost. Handling a number of these claim files, I think I was handling about at least 200 at any one time. I found it quite emotionally draining, and after a few years I decided to leave the firm and take a break. I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue in private practice. So while on a break, because I'm not very good at doing nothing, I qualified as a factual investigator using my policing skills and my legal background. I then worked as a subcontractor to the leading insurers in Queensland, without naming names, for workplace injuries and also motor vehicle accidents. So really, I had, in effect, switched sides. Where I had been working on behalf of claimants before, I was actually now receiving instruction from the very lawyers I used to sit opposite, opposite to. It was interesting work though, because I got to see a lot of different work sites and conduct the investigations there. During that time, I also qualified as a workplace health and safety officer. So I completed that training, and I subcontracted to a firm in Brisbane who was consulting in that area on a part-time basis. Then life happened, as it does, and I found myself as a sole parent. So I wasn't able to continue the consulting work or the investigation work. I studied a grad dip in OHS extramurally through Massey University in New Zealand. And once I'd completed that, I moved into workplace health and safety roles where the work hours were conducive to childcare drop off and pick up times. It was tough, but it was, I got through it. It was achievable. With the support of an employer at the time, I was able to continue with some tertiary education, and I actually completed another grad dip. It was actually in business studies, majoring in HR during my time working for them. So that was great. I enjoy challenging myself. I've worked in several workplace health and safety management roles in various organisations in the private and public sectors, including local and federal government organisations. My industry experience includes supply chain, warehousing, logistics, road maintenance, construction, manufacturing, and retail. So it's quite diverse. I was actually the National Workplace Health and Safety Manager. I was in that role before and during the COVID pandemic. And I found managing the various jurisdictional responses to the pandemic and also the day-to-day health and safety work that I was dealing with and my team was dealing with, I found it very stressful. I decided to return to consulting at that time because my son has got a bit older, and I established Organisational Risk Consulting, and this is the business's first year of trading. So I have a website, feel free to check it out. The business is going well, and I enjoy being able to support businesses using my legal experience, so with WHS legal compliance issues, risk management, and I enjoy being able to draw on my previous knowledge from having worked in those areas. There's still things that I don't know, and I'm still learning. I'm always trying to improve on what I've done before. I think it's really important to challenge yourself and to read broadly. I try to take part in webinars in areas such as leadership and management and psychology and law and investigation, because there's so many learnings from those fields that can actually be used in health and safety. And there's so much relevant information out there.
Good, good. All right. Just a couple of things that you brought up there. Just curious about whereabouts in New Zealand were you based as a constable?
I was based in Hara, which is in South Taranaki. Taranaki's on the west coast of the North Island. There's a beautiful mountain there. And I was based in Hara, which is the largest town in that area. We had 26 constables and myself. And we had a huge area to cover.
Yeah. Look, I don't know, and I've got to be honest and say I don't know very much about New Zealand, except my lovely wife's from Auckland. I've been to Auckland and I've been to a few places in the North Island, but all a bit of a blur. But lovely country. Now, looking at the roles that you've had and taken, okay. I'm assuming there's a strong characteristic of seeking natural justice or social justice in you.
Yes. I think so. I think we need to be empathetic to people, and regardless of whatever role you're in, and communicate with them and be transparent in our dealings. In health and safety. I know that's really important, transparency, to build a safety culture in a business.
Yeah, look, one question I ask people who've done similar sort of work a bit, because I tend to find it's usually the same answer, but I get curious. I've done some, at one stage I was doing quite a bit of, let's say, compliance and enforcement roles in various categories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to ask the question of people who have been in these roles, and that means police, for example, in some cases security, but also any sort of other roles where you have an enforcement capability or part of your job. What made it attractive to you? What was the driving purpose?
I wanted to help people. I wanted to change from the laboratory work that I'd been doing for years, which was quite repetitive.
Yep.
I had friends who had joined the police, and they were saying to me, "Come on, come give this a go. Every day is different." Well, they're quite right. Every day is different.
Oh dear! Can I just say that was exactly the answer I thought it'd be. I've never met someone who's joined the police or corrections or anything like that who hasn't said, "I want to help people." Who hasn't said that they've wanted to help people, or they wanted to improve the world, or they wanted to make the world a better place. The unfortunate fact I find for a lot of those same people is they go in to change the world, and they end up leaving those organisations saying the world changed me, unfortunately, and it does happen.
It does,
and I don't mean to, for those lovely people involved in law enforcement. I think you do a marvelous job, but I think there are a lot of us that leave those sort of roles a bit less naive and a bit perhaps more scarred rather than anyhow, we'll move past that.
Look, I know what you mean, Tom. I don't regret having my time being in the police at all, but it was definitely the right time for me to leave when I did. I learnt a lot about people and interacting with people during that time. So I've no regrets, but it was also the right time for me to leave when I left.
Yeah, look, the other thing I found about it, when you talk about knowing people, but you also walk away from those roles understanding or believing in yourself a lot more, because you've been put in situations you didn't think you might be able to handle, and then you come out and you go, well, I managed that, and I managed this person, and I was able to do these things that most people wouldn't necessarily be able to do. So yeah, it is an interesting type of work, but yeah, congratulations for doing that, and for anyone who actually takes those roles on, and I give them my heartfelt thanks. All right, you've dealt with a lot of workers who've been injured in Australia as a lawyer, and then doing the other side. First of all, as a lawyer, what's your honest opinion of the workers' compensation schemes we have in Australia? Do they deliver justice or not?
Look, coming from New Zealand, where we have ACC in place, which is a government run system, to then be here in Australia and working under a different approach, I'm really not sure that there is a perfect system out there. Each has their pluses and their minuses. As far as how can it be improved, I'm sure that that question has been asked multiple times, and I'm not sure it can be. At least there is a system in place to assist. Yeah,
look, I agree. I've battled my head against trying to come up with solutions that might help, but the best I can explain to people is the system ain't perfect, but at least we have a system, and it's the alternative at the moment is we take the system or we have nothing. And I'm fairly certain that most workers who get injured, or they mightn't think it's perfect, appreciate the fact that there is some sort of coverage to help them recover and get back to work in the best situations, but at least to help them through those times where they may have been injured at work. So
I agree.
The other thing I'd like to say is there used to be an awful lot of nonsense that used to be spun around workers' compensation, that there were majority of claims were bogus and people were defrauding the system. You've seen it from both sides of the fence. Is that actually true?
Look, there are some out there, and it was interesting doing the factual investigation work on workplace injuries, because I did uncover quite a few of those. But when I was practicing as a lawyer, actually, we would always interview clients first, and you could pick up inconsistencies and in their stories. So we would interview them before we would actually take them on as a client. Yes, there are some dodgy ones out there, but there are also quite a lot of very genuine claimants. So I know that there was a lot of rhetoric around, they're all fake, and ambulance chasing, lawyers type thing. But there are genuine genuine people out there. There's a few of the matters that I dealt with, those stories I've shared before, when I've actually been in workplace health and safety. One of them was where a person actually started on their first day of work, and they didn't go through any induction. There was no induction, no training. They were heavy vehicle driver, and they were told to go and put a Manitou, which is like a little forklift thing, onto the back of a truck. Can you go off and do that? So this person, he had been a long haul truck driver, and he wanted to do the right thing because he had taken this job so he could be closer to his family. So he goes off and he goes to put this Manitou onto the back of the truck. While doing so, while he's got the Manitou, so what they do is they actually put the mast up and put the tines into some attachments onto the back of the truck, and then you actually pull the Manitou up and you're able to drive it onto the back. So the Manitou was up in the air and he was moving it onto the back, and the slots on the back of the truck actually came off. The whole Manitou flipped over. Of course, he was inside. He broke his back, and this was his first day of work. And he was one of the claimants that I dealt with. I didn't actually meet him. I think it was about 3 years later. By that time, he had gone through quite a bit of surgery. He was able to walk, but with a cane. He would never be able to walk on his, unassisted. At least he could do that. He had been through a relationship breakdown. He wasn't able to see his kids. He lost touch with a lot of people. He wasn't able to play rugby before, which is something he did enjoy. So there's a few of those matters that still stick with me, and I talk to people about, say, hey, this is real. This is a real event that happened. It's really important that we have measures in place so you don't have something similar in your workplace.
Yeah. And it's quite often the things that we selectively hear. Like even when you started that the story there, I heard that the first day, and I can honestly say, despite the fact that I've been through, I've been on workers' comp, and despite the fact that I've seen an awful lot of things, the first thing I heard was first day. I went, oh, here we go. This is going to be a bogus story, but no, it's not. It's terrible how we can pick up on those things. Look, I also think that the fact that we've had in the past that's nonsense about workers' comp and everyone making bogus claims has sort of added to the stigma for people who get genuinely injured at work about wanting to put in a valid claim for workers' comp. And it's scary because you still hear predominantly in a lot of workplaces, you still hear from people that you'd never put a workers' compensation claim in because if you do that, you'll never get another job. And I just go, how scary is that? We're in 2023, and you've still got this huge stigma that employers are just going to wipe you for something that you may have had zero control over.
That's right. I think that's especially so because HR, can request a copy of an applicant's work cover or workers' compensation history. They're not meant to use that against the person, but who's to say?
Yeah. Oh, it's just a little sad that that still happens. Okay. Let's talk. Okay. As well, congratulations also about running your own business. To be honest, I've anyone who starts up their own business, I have a lot of respect for, because it is sometimes fraught with danger. Statistics tell us that. Having run my own business twice, once successfully, but also once that failed spectacularly, I do have a lot of respect for anyone who goes out and says, right, I'm going to make this business my own. There are a lot of positives for that, but it's also sometimes an awful lot of work. So congratulations there.
Thank you.
All right. So you've worked as a consultant. You've also worked as an employee for organisations in the safety field. Which do you prefer? I'm guessing it's consultancy. You're doing that right now.
It is. It is. I like the flexibility. I also enjoy meeting new clients and learning about their business operations, and seeing how I can actually support and assist them. Yes, there are challenges, and setting up my own business, it is daunting. There's been a lot of work go into it behind the scenes, and but I'm enjoying it. The flexibility now means I can attend training and conferences like the AIHS National Health and Safety Conference recently. I can actually get to those, whereas before it was a bit more challenging to do that as in the employee role. I also quite enjoy working in the evenings, so it means that I can adjust my hours of work. I have some flexibility there where it hasn't been possible before as an employee in a role. Having said that, in a WHS employee role, you do have stability, and so I'm not putting that down at all. I know for myself, it was great being in those roles when my son was younger. Now I can actually do what I prefer, which is the consulting side.
Yeah, I can understand that. All right. As a consultant, have you ever had to deliver some tough news to your clients?
I have, yes. Look, no one likes receiving bad news, so I really try to be empathetic and put myself in the client's place, and also be diplomatic when I'm presenting to them. It's good to commend them on being proactive on the fact that they've actually sought assistance in the first place. I apply a similar approach to that when auditing. So if I can identify, the good things about the business and the positive things that they're doing, so I lead with that, and then I talk about the areas that could be improved and make recommendations on how I can support them to make those improvements in their organisation. I found that the approach works quite well.
Yeah, good. All right. It's an interesting thing. Lovely LinkedIn gives me access to a broad range of people with greater knowledge than me. And one of them posted an article about a research project that was done in a particular state in America, and it escapes me. That's one of my age moments that I have. But it was conducted over a period of several decades, and it looked at businesses who put in place robust health and safety prevention schemes and systems in place to prevent injury and to at least meet legal requirements, and those who basically ignored that and took the chance. And the finding was overwhelmingly that the businesses who basically took the risk with their people's health and safety, we'll just say with, they were the businesses that actually lasted longer, or endured longer than those that actually were highly compliant with the law and valued safety more. Now, the only reason I bring that up is Do you think that the penalties that we put in place for breaching the safety legislation in Australia is in fact, I won't even say an effective deterrent, I'll say a deterrent for business owners who are considering whether it's actually worthwhile complying with the law or not?
I'm not sure it is. I think in businesses there's still a lack of awareness about what the law is and some of the penalties. I think there's businesses out there who, yes, they're ignoring the legal requirements, but it's often because they don't know what they are. They're unaware of it. I think as there's more prosecutions of businesses, especially where those prosecutions are made public by the media, that may change. But as far as the penalties go, I think there's still a perception that it doesn't apply to me. That's just my opinion. Others might disagree.
I agree. That's why we asked. We asked for your opinion because, your opinion's valuable. It's the same as everyone else's, as in you have a valuable opinion. I was speaking to a gentleman recently and he said, and this is an interesting, he said, in Australia, we have our priorities and focuses all wrong. And I was like, well, this is going to be an interesting statement that follows up. And sure enough, he followed up with this. He said, someone who dies in a workplace incident, and we'll just use the example of those two gentlemen who died in North Queensland in a mining accident recently. A week after that happens, no one talks about them. No one ever, it's not considered, it's business as usual. And he said, but, several years after we blow up a cultural artifact, people are still bringing up in the media. And he said, there has to be a change of focus here because we're obviously not valuing human life very, highly. If we can just consign people who die to, I don't know, yesterday's newspaper. Do you think that's the case?
Unfortunately, I think you might be right there. Because unless it's a matter such as, something big's happened, say Dreamworld incident, let's hope we don't have any more of those, where there's multiple fatalities, and it is deemed to be the public interest for the media to follow that sort of incident. Unless it's something like that, I'm not seeing a lot come through the mainstream media at all. On fatalities or significant incidents, which is a shame. It needs to be promoted to improve the awareness.
I guess the mainstream media are a good, well, they'd say they're a good pulse of public opinion, and if they're not publicising it, they're saying that it's the public doesn't really have a significant interest, which is quite sad. I think one of the things I thought about recently was we have these wonderful memorials for those who've served overseas and not returned and that, but we don't have a solid memorial with workers' names who have gone to work who've never returned. We have Workers' Memorial Day and everyone celebrates, but we don't remember those who never came home. We don't remember them. And it really is sad for me that that's the case.
Anyway. That's true.
All right. Time to get back on topic. All right. Queensland, lovely Queensland. We do have this lovely so I'll do the inverted commas, harmonised legislation across Australia. I don't know if it really is harmonised anymore, but that's all right. We'll move past that. And some states for good reasons, go out on their own and do things because they want to make the safety conditions of the workplace the safest in Australia, in their state. So congratulations for that. But it'd be nice if we did a national system. But anyhow, Queensland, we have these codes of practice, which, unlike other states, they're legally enforceable. Speaking as a lawyer and also a health and safety professional, does the fact that they are legally enforceable create a bigger challenge for businesses who want to operate in Queensland than those who want to operate in other states?
Look, I'm not sure it does. I think it actually may provide Queensland businesses with a clearer direction of what is required to reach the standard under the Act. Regardless of the jurisdiction, the PCBU, so the persons in charge of the business or undertaking must ensure, so far as reasonably practicable, the health and safety of workers and others. So that's in place everywhere. The codes of practice actually provide information to help businesses achieve the legal standard required under the WHS Act. In Queensland, yes, they have made it compulsory for duty holders to comply with the approved code or to manage hazards or risks using another method. So it could be a technical standard or an industry standard, as long as that other method provides an equal or higher level of health and safety than is required by the code. In other jurisdictions, for example, New South Wales, compliance with code of practice is not mandatory, and it is recognised there that there might be a better way of achieving the standard required. I think the challenge for businesses in New South Wales, for example, is that the courts may use the code of practice as evidence of what is known about the hazard and use that to determine what is reasonably practicable in the circumstances.
Yep.
So businesses in those other jurisdictions would still need to achieve compliance with the code or put in controls that were at that level or higher in those situations. I think in Queensland, by the fact that it has been made mandatory, it gives businesses a very clear direction. This is what needs to be in place, or you find an industry standard or technical standard that gives a higher level of a higher standard.
Good. No, that's excellent. Speaking of reasonably practical,
yep,
largely misunderstood by a lot of business owners, and other people as well. What is reasonably practical?
Reasonably practical is basically what can be done, should be done in the circumstances, unless of course it's unreasonable to put in a control measure to manage a risk. So it's actually set out in Section 18 of the WHS Act, and the Act includes a list of matters that should be considered, and these are things like the likelihood of the hazard or risk occurring. So really it's businesses need to put in whatever control measures they can to manage risks and ensure the health and safety of their workers.
I like the bit where it says what is known about the risk, or what reasonably ought to be known about the risk. I think that when you take that back to codes of practice, that actually gives businesses, a bit of guidance there that well, this is out there in public domain. You reasonably ought to know about it because it's there. It's easily available. If you type into Google, what do I need to control a hazard? It's if there's reasonable amount of information out there, you should be abreast of that because, that's meeting your duties.
That's right. I agree.
Okay. There's some proposed changes coming into the lovely Queensland Act. What are they? What, because I used to be abreast of Queensland Act quite comprehensively, but as I'm further and further away, it seems to be harder for me to keep abreast of the changes. What's potentially going to be changing?
So there's been a review conducted on the Work Health and Safety Act here in Queensland. The review sought to clarify and enhance the existing frameworks and ensure the Act's overall effectiveness. The final review report was actually released last year in December. A copy can be obtained from the WorkSafe Queensland website, just on their news page. The Queensland Government has accepted all 31 recommendations that have been made in the review, and it's anticipated that there will be a bill introduced later this year to implement the recommendations. The main recommendations are around elevating the role of the health and safety representatives, so your HSRs in the workplace, clarifying the rights of health and safety representatives, and streamlining dispute resolution processes. There are a few others as well. I think subject to the wording of the proposed bill later this year, but I don't think the amendments are too onerous on businesses. Others might disagree. I've had a quick read through it all, and I noted some of the amendments include the fact that the PCBUs will be required to proactively encourage and support the establishment of work groups and the election of health and safety reps, and also to ensure that workers right across the business are aware of the role and the functions of a health and safety representative. Health and safety representatives will be included in more safety reporting matters in the workplace, so more engaged than what they are now. The time for the health and safety reps to complete their training will be shortened from 3 months to 28 days. And where we have refresher training required every 3 years at the moment, that is to be changed to an annual basis.
Okay.
There are a number of the recommendations are around clarifying and streamlining dispute resolution process, but there's a few, just 3 other key ones I'll just mention here that I thought were interesting. One of them is to actually elevate the hierarchy of controls from the WHS regulations and put it into the Act. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any changes made there to the wording. There's also to be an introduction of an obligation for a PCBU to notify the regulator of an incident which did not result in a serious injury or illness, but it had the capacity to do so. And finally, a recommendation to examine the scope and application of the industrial manslaughter provisions and to determine if it actually warrants amendment. So subject to the wording of the amendment bill, which we won't know till later on, there are some little tweaks going on there, and it could be quite interesting.
Oh yeah. That's great. That's opened my eyes significantly. The things that that jump out at me is the refresher training I can understand. I think that's, but the thing is, be interesting for me to work out is the refresher training mandatory? Because if it is, that's a big step. That's a big step. We're taking it from as per requested to mandatory. If that happens, that's significant. But also, if they're revising industrial manslaughter, I'll be very, very curious to see what they come up with, because to lead on to my next question, the way that industrial manslaughter is currently worded, do you actually believe that any PCBUs or officers for very large organisations will be successfully prosecuted for industrial manslaughter, or will it just be the what's we've seen so far, that it's small to medium businesses where the PCBU has significant control over or significant influence over day-to-day operations of the business that will be subject to it?
I think it's going to be the latter. I think there could be a successful prosecution of corporate officers in a large matter, such a dream world, and as long as it's in the public interest to do so. But you have to bear in mind that these prosecutions cost a lot of money, and they take time. I think the industrial manslaughter provisions in the Act are aimed more towards those PCBUs who have management or control of the day-to-day activities of the business. So I'm not sure that we're going to see too many of the large organisations prosecuted.
Yeah.
I might be wrong.
No, I think you're dead on the money, and other people with a legal background I've spoken to sort of reflect your point of view there. So, yeah, to me, it's good legislation insofar as it reflects public opinion with penalties, but it misses the mark for corporate responsibility. But that's just my opinion. And I will say, if I could be very negative about it, I could say it's there as a knee-jerk reaction from politicians to say they're doing something, knowing full well there will be very little outcome from this legislation other than a headline if they ever get a successful prosecution, which after 2 weeks people will completely forget about. But that's just me being a little pessimistic there, perhaps. All right. You've done a lot of investigating of incidents. Any tips for people who are being involved or are starting off investigating incidents, what they should do, what they should look for?
Look, immediately after an incident, what I've asked people to do is whoever's at the scene, ask them to take photos. You can gather so much information later on from a photograph. So photograph the whole area. Try not to photograph the poor injured party receiving care from the paramedics. I've had a few of those. But take photos of the whole scene. Take notes of witnesses, whoever was there at the time who may have seen something. The weather, what was the weather like, the angle of the sun, and that sort of thing. So if the people at the scene were able to jot down that sort of information, later on when you come actually to do the investigation, you've already got these great tips in place. So as an investigator or a safety manager going out to an incident scene, so after the event, first of all, try and visit the scene as soon as you can. Speak and obtain statements or notes from any witnesses and the injured party as soon as you can. Don't worry if the stories that they give you or their version of events don't actually align, because everyone perceives things slightly different. And that's okay, because they could be standard somewhere else, or the angle that they viewed the situation. So gather as much information as you can. Often what I've found in safety roles is there's been some pressure from management about, what's the root cause? Give me the root cause. They're wanting to know that straight away. Don't rush to conclusions. You want to make sure that you examine all of the fact-based, not the opinion-based, the fact-based evidence to come up with your findings. There might be multiple contributing factors that are all important. So don't worry if you have a large number of those. Those are good because you can actually put in measures to rectify those issues as well for the business. So take your time as much as you can. I'm not saying delay the investigation, but just try not to jump to conclusions. Those would be my tips.
Good. And in your experience, biggest or most common contributing factor in safety incidents? Is there any?
I think it would probably have to be around induction and training, and the way that is understood by the worker, the participant. Sometimes I know that training might be given in a PowerPoint, and it's a great means of communicating, but not everyone learns, as you would know, Tom, by reading script. So then it needs to be interactive, and that needs to be taken into account. So if you are inducting someone, a forklift operator, for example, their strengths may not be reading pages of policy. You need to present it in a way that they can understand and comprehend it. I think that's really important. So tailoring that training. Actually, one of the things I saw at the AIHS National Health and Safety Conference, on the third day, they were talking about future focus and the use of technology. And one of the presenters spoke about using virtual reality as a training tool for things like very practical training on a site, confined space and that sort of thing, because it is so immersive, and it gave the trainee an experience while still being in a safe environment.
Yeah. I'm all for anything that does that. I find the requirements for training, if people look at like Section 19, it's there generally, but I really do encourage business owners, if they're in doubt what training is required, etc., head on down to the regulations, look up Regulation 39, and it's quite explicit what the training should cover for each type of role. And I just, I only know that because I like reading legislation, but I really do encourage business owners to actually go this step further than just knowing a little bit about the Act and then going, well, this is all vague, and think about it, because it is a vital step. It is a vital step, and it is required by law. So, I don't know, just do it. All right. Final question, because we're running out of time. In your opinion, are workplaces becoming safer to work in Australia?
Well, I certainly hope so. In the profession, the workplace health and safety profession, there's some fantastic practitioners, and I think the information available to businesses, there's a lot more of it these days, and I think it's probably written and communicated in a way that's easier to understand. So is it becoming safer? I'm not sure on the stats, but I certainly hope it is.
Yeah. We live in hope. All right. Andrea, thanks so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, but we are running out of time. So I'm going to say goodbye, but I really do look forward to speaking to you again. And thank you once again.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure.
Welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. Here's your host, Tom Bourne.